Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Orange Crush podcast. Happy Tuesday, if you can call it that, for a lot of Clemson fans who are angry about a win over Pitt, who are angry about the offensive line, who are angry about noon kick times, who are angry about game day maybe or maybe not coming, or who are just angry because it's raining and you can see the ghost or flickering my lights. Welcome to the podcast. Grayson Mann, of course, the co-host here. But we are thrilled to have Faxon Childress, the voice, 105.5, the Roar, on with us. Faxon, before we get into all of the anger, welcome, my man.
Yeah, Grayson hit me up about coming on. Obviously, y'all are both my guys. Absolute no-brainer to hop on the Orange Crush podcast. I've been tuned in to a lot of the different episodes. You guys have been doing a lot of great content with the basketball team. I liked the pre-season interview series. You've had my boy Sean Poppy on a couple times as well. So you guys are doing great work. I give Grayson some airtime on the Roar every week for TigerNet Thursdays. Had to repay the favor and come on the pod.
Yeah, we'll get started, Faxon. Just wanted to give you a chance to talk about your show real quick, about where fans can find you to get maybe your angry musings from the week with Clemson football. Faxon, it's been really an honor to see you grow, and I'll watch you on Faxon Sports from 9 to 12. But talk about your show real quick before we get into the messes.
It's a great show, by the way.
Yes.
I appreciate that, David. So Faxon Sports runs from 9 to 12, Monday through Friday on 105.5, 97.5, The Roar. The Clemson Athletics flagship station. You can also check it out at theroarfm.com. And we also have a mobile app under The Roar in the App Store on Android, iPhone, whatever phone you're on. We should have something for you to be able to tune in. But it's John Hyatt and myself. He does a great job co-hosting and producing, and a very dominant college football show right now during college football season. But I'm a big-time college basketball guy as well. John is very knowledgeable about the National Football League, so we do some NFL talk. Anything you need for updates in the sports world and some hot takes, and two guys just having some fun. 9 to 12 on the Roar, Monday through Friday. We keep it light, we keep it loose, a lot of energy, and definitely just about having fun and talking ball with the guys.
All right, so now that we're talking ball, let's talk about what Clemson head coach Dabo Swinney said to us earlier. He said something Sunday during his teleconference that prompted me to ask a question, when he said that we're going to roll somebody out there Saturday against the Citadel. So I asked him today, what does that look like? Who's going to be available? It sounds like Marcus Tate not available. Sounds like Tristan Lee could be available, but maybe they would rather hold him, not get him hurt again. And Dabo said that there were 9 offensive linemen out at practice last night. What do we think about this heading into Citadel week? What do you do if you're the coaching staff? You've got a quarterback you have to protect. What does this week look like, Faxon?
Yeah, to be honest with you, there are a couple different ways that the coaching staff can elect to approach this week. Personally, if Cade Klubnik didn't play in the second half of this game, regardless against the Citadel, I don't think I would complain. I'm not sure there would be a ton of Clemson fans that complain, because what's going on the offensive line right now for the Tigers, I would deem as an injury crisis. There are a couple other position groups and a couple other players that are banged up, but with the O-line specifically, to have 9 rotational pieces, multiple starters, all unavailable to even get on the field and be able to practice, none of those guys necessarily in a ramp-up process as of right now. This is going to be a really weird and interesting game against the Citadel. I know you guys put out a piece on TigerNet about the potential of seeing some walk-on offensive linemen this upcoming weekend against the Citadel. I definitely think that's in the mix. But, David, to your point, the number one priority this upcoming weekend in a game which is, if we're being real with ourselves, roll the ball out, win by 30-plus type of game between an FBS and an FCS type of team, then the number one priority needs to be keeping Cade Klubnik healthy amongst all other things. You can't win without that guy, and you need to keep 2 upright and healthy throughout the course of this game.
Yeah, and we saw against Pittsburgh that Cade Klubnik, whenever they needed it most from that squad, they were able to get it. And against a team like the Citadel, where it's a buffer now between the most important Palmetto Bowl in likely over a decade, keeping Cade Klubnik upright and healthy is going to be the utmost goal. What other things, Faxon, do you want to sort of see addressed? Because this week is unique for Clemson before that rivalry game. It's a tune-up, in a sense, to where they can get some things ironed out, even with the injuries. What maybe are you looking for? Not, they need this to win, but what do they want to tune up in your eyes before South Carolina?
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for Dee Creighton and some of the younger linebackers to continue to get their feet wet and get some more experience. Obviously, Sammy Brown will be back in the mix this week. Wasn't in the second half, so he's not suspended for targeting in the first half. But with Wade Wood as questionable, with Barrett Carter eating 93 of 95 snaps, and I mean, Barrett can say he was ready to go 100 more. I would not have been ready to go 100 more personally, and that guy needs a second half off probably more than anyone this upcoming week against the Citadel. So Grayson, to your point, I think it's a great week for the youth and the depth to continue to get a lot of experience for the Tigers. I'm hoping to see some extended burn for Christopher Vizina, backup quarterback, to continue to see how he's progressing along. Heard really good things about his continued development over the course of practice this season. And then some of the game time we've seen, he's been pretty good. So I'm pretty excited about Vizina, but keep Cade Klubnik upright, develop the younger guys, and play as many walk-ons as possible on the offensive line to keep the scholarship guys healthy. I think those are the three main things heading into this weekend against the Citadel.
And I'll tell you what I would do. Love Phil Maffa. That dude has not looked right the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's obvious that shoulder is bothering him. He's just a few yards shy of 1,000. I would let him run down the hill. I would hand him the football, get him the 1,000 yards, and then I'd say, take your helmet off and go sit down and enjoy this one. And something we haven't seen in 3 weeks. Let's go let some of those babies play.
Yeah, I mean, listen, RB2 and RB3 have essentially been non-existent from a production perspective for Clemson this year. I know we talk a lot about Jane Haynes. I know we talk a lot about Keith Adams Jr., Ezzy Amume. I think all three of those guys are talented players and have a chance to be good players in the future for Clemson. But the reality of the situation, as this has been the lion's share of the workload, has gone to Phil Maffa this year. I mean, no other running, unless I'm mistaken from one of the games against the lower tier opponents, I don't think another running back on Clemson's roster has even cracked 150 yards total this year. It's essentially been a non-factor in the run game for the Tigers. We expected Haynes to have a little bit more of a role over the course of the season. I thought he could be a scat back, a complementary piece this year that could continue to kind of develop into his own role. That hasn't really been the case for whatever reason. None of those guys have necessarily gotten the opportunity to shine. So David, I think that's a great point about Phil Maffa, a guy that's clearly banged up. He's had a lot of wear and tear throughout the course of the season. Get your 1,000 yards, kick your feet up, and enjoy watching your guys go out there and win it on Military Appreciation Day, because at the end of the day, this is a much better opportunity for Jay Haynes, David Ezzy-Amume, Keith Adams Jr., guys like that to get their experience and reps in against real live bodies that aren't wearing orange in practice than it is for Phil Maffa to risk a potential injury this upcoming weekend against the Citadel.
And just so you know, Jay Haynes, 31 rushes, 151 yards.
Oh, my goodness. I missed it by 1 yard.
Get him out. Get him out. He's done. Faxon, something Dabo Sweeney pointed out in his press conference today that really caught my eye, maybe I had to ask a follow-up question, was he talked about the development at the defensive end side with Peter Woods almost in a slow burn, transitioning back to that defensive tackle spot against Pittsburgh. And he mentioned that, hey, some of the play of our defensive ends have really started to ramp up a bit. Jaheim Lawson, Cade Denhoff. You and I have talked extensively about that being one of the main weaknesses of this roster was depth at defensive end. Do you agree maybe with Sweeney's comments, seeing someone like Lawson getting extended playing time against Virginia Tech, getting extended playing time against Pittsburgh? Has that development, have you seen that, or is that something that you're still looking to improve? Because I have seen that. Woods has going to move more inside, and I think it allows for better matchups for guys like TJ Parker, who had a monstrous game on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Jaheim Lawson's in a really intriguing position as a developmental piece at D end. I think when you talk about the physicality that he brings to the table, the strength of his hands, the power moves, he's got it there. But, there's still a next level of his game that he needs to unlock. And for me personally, that's in the run game. I've got no question that Jaheim Lawson can get to the passer and overpower certain tackles in this league and, get pressures and get hurries and all that. You got to be able to set the edge on the outside run game on defense. And that's been one of the biggest issues for Clemson throughout the course of the season. It was an issue at the beginning of the Pitt game where Desmond Reed was able to get outside the tackles, busted down the left sidelines. I think Jaden Lucas missed a tackle. One of the defensive ends missed a tackle on that one as well. So while there are developmental pieces and while there has been some progression from those developmental pieces at D end, I still have some concerns about Clemson's overall talent level at that position going forward, and especially into next season. And, we can rip the Band-Aid off and go ahead since people are getting mad throughout the course of these weeks. You have the scholarship limit increasing to 105. You got a lot of roster changes coming throughout college football headed into next season. If you want to look at transfer portal positions that are a hypothetical for the Clemson Tigers headed into 2025, I think defensive end is probably number one on your board, and you're looking for another killer to go play opposite TJ Parker. Because if you could line up a dude next to Peter Woods, TJ Parker on the other side, and have a couple of these DTs coming back next year, Clemson could shape up to have one of the best defensive lines in the country. And that's not to say that I don't believe in a guy like Lawson. I don't believe in a guy like Zaire Patterson, who's kind of still lurking in the shadows and developing. I do believe in those guys. But fellas, we were all there when Clemson was winning national championships. Those defensive line rooms were deep, and the edge rooms were deep, and those second cycle of rushers coming off the edge were still productive. We haven't seen that to the same level in the last 3 or 4 years for Clemson football, and I think they need to get back to that level.
Interesting that you mentioned Peter Woods. Him moving inside seemed to really make a difference. And I was talking to an NFL guy on the sidelines at Pitt Saturday, and we were talking about Peter, and he said Peter would have, I'm not sure that he said started on their NFL team. He goes, but Peter would have played on our team last year. Okay. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. He is so disruptive. And I think the day that you saw, now Dabo kind of dismissed this earlier. I think somebody had asked him, did Peter moving inside help TJ Parker? And Dabo's like, no, that's all TJ Parker. Well, when Peter's not at defensive tackle, TJ Parker gets double teamed. All of a sudden, you move 11 inside, and that's going to free up 3. I think his name Jackson Brown Johnson, something like that. Number 77 for Pitt. He was eaten alive all day long by TJ Parker. And at one point, he kind of pulled off his helmet and he started fussing at the sideline official. And I don't know what he was fussing about. And the official just shook his head like, you're the one that's got to go blocking. Like, quit fussing at me. Go blocking. One of the best games we've ever seen the defensive end have. And, the Tigers aren't going to have that kind of effort this week. But I guarantee in about 10, 11 days, they're going to have that kind of effort.
Yeah, that's the elephant in the room, right? Is hate weeks kind of been extended into 2 hate weeks this year with the Gamecocks having Wofford and the Tigers having the Citadel. No disrespect to those 2 in-state programs. Grayson, I do a lot of work for the SoCon. We love the SoCon around here. It's just a different ball game specifically related to college football. It's going to be 2 beatings this weekend in the state of South Carolina. But to the point, David, I think Clemson's defense is at its best when Peter Woods is on the interior. And, being able to take double teams out of the opposing team's game plan against TJ Parker, not to say that he'll never see it, but the frequency that Parker was seeing double teams when Woods was on the other edge is significantly higher than the frequency of double teams that Parker is seeing when Woods is on the interior, because it causes much more of a disadvantage going up against Clemson, in my opinion, for opponents to have to prep and have to game plan. I think Clemson's at their best when 11's inside. I think it just says a lot about 11, the fact that he's 320 and bumping to the outside and playing edge. That doesn't even seem real. It seems like something you load into a video game and you create a player and you're just turning it on rookie mode and going and getting sacks because he's bigger than everybody else. Like, Peter Woods is a true freak. He's one of one. But I do think his best position for this defense and as an NFL prospect is at defensive tackle.
Just moving to the offensive side of the ball, Faxon, love to get your opinion on just what we've seen from this unit specifically in November, because in September, October, and as David and I have put it on this podcast, they weren't really necessarily playing teams with a defensive pulse. And so you saw a lot of free shots. You saw this offense moving with a lot of fluidity. And we haven't necessarily seen that on a consistent basis, even in these 2 wins on the road. A lot of it I attribute to sometimes drops disrupting drives, a lot of penalties we've seen that were killer against Georgia. What have you seen from this unit, and maybe where's the bright spot besides maybe Klubnik's heroics late against Pittsburgh that gives you hope to say, hey, this is something that can develop to maybe take down South Carolina and wherever they land in the postseason?
Yeah, it's definitely been an up and down year for the Clemson offense, starting with about as down as you can get, only putting up 3 points and not scoring a touchdown against UGA in the opener. And then, the 6-game win streak that ensued where Clemson was lighting the entire world on fire. And as you alluded to, Grayson, it was against some pretty lackluster competition. But I do think that Clemson still has a great offense, if you want me to be honest with you. I think that this Tigers offense has produced, you can't control your scheduling. You can't control who's in front of you. and the game against Louisville, which is the other loss, that if Clemson doesn't end up making it to the ACC championship game, ultimately that will be the reason why. I thought the run defense was much more of a concern than the offense. I'm a big-time believer in Cade Klubnik. I'm still a big believer in Garrett Riley, even though obviously not all of us are going to agree with all the decisions and all the play calls made all the time. I think Coach Riley's done a great job in year 2 with Klubnik as his quarterback, taking that next step forward for him and for his quarterback. But if you want me to be honest with you, Grayson, I feel like a lot of pressure in this offense is put on Cade Klubnik to play great when it comes to playing against the top opponents that Clemson has played on their schedule, even against the Pitt. I mean, what Klubnik was able to accomplish in the first half was legitimately heroic. There were free rushers in his face on what felt like every other play. Over the course of the second half, Clemson couldn't even keep the ball on the field because of how bad the offensive line situation was. Cade took a bad sack at some point in the second half too, and he tried to do the run backwards thing and get out of it. That's going to happen, and I didn't really care at that point in time because they were punting the football back anyways. A third down sack isn't weighted the same as other sacks, but yeah, I really am still a believer in this Clemson offense, but the O-line injuries combined with the fact that South Carolina has a top 5 defensive front in the country and are on the schedule in 11 days, that is admittedly a little bit alarming, but I'm still a believer that this team is going to be able to find a way to produce against South Carolina. And I think we're drinking the South Carolina Kool-Aid a little bit too much, if you want me to be honest with you. This is little bro at the end of the day. This is a rivalry that Dabo Swinney and Clemson have dominated over the last decade plus of college football. And a lot of Clemson fans are taking the doom and gloom approach right now. That's not something that I've elected to do. I understand that the trajectory of the two teams seems like it's the opposite right now, with Clemson dealing with some injuries and having a recent loss. But I'm not scared of South Carolina, if you want me to be completely honest with you. I'm not scared of that defense. I'm not scared of Clayton White. And I think Cade Klubnik and the offense are going to have the answers here in 11 days in Death Valley.
David, you are muted, sir. Well, while David unmutes himself, can you elaborate maybe on what you've seen from South Carolina in these first this sample size that we've gotten so far?
Yeah, hang on. No, I don't know why I went on mute, but let me start. Let me go back right there. I love what he said. I am one of those people that feels like if you're not Georgia or Texas, there's a lot of good SEC teams, but not great SEC teams. Yep. My eyes still tell me Georgia's the best team in the country. Maybe Oregon is right there. Texas is right there. But once you get past those teams, there's a lot of teams that are just kind of like, okay, we're okay. You can put Tennessee in there because they were taken to the wire by Arkansas. LSU's gone to the wire with people. South Carolina, man, give them all the credit in the world. But Texas A&M put out a running quarterback and said, guess what? We're going to start that running quarterback against your defense next week. South Carolina's like, okay, thanks for the heads up. Now we know what to do to stop that. And they got beat by Ole Miss. Yeah, Alabama was in it. I don't drink a lot of the Kool-Aid. I think they're good. Yeah. I don't think they're real good. I think Clemson's the more talented team. My concern would be here's what I saw Saturday would be play calling on offense, because I saw Pitt stack the box with 9 men, right? So what do you do when you stack the box with 9 men? Well, you run your quarterback, you move him out of the pocket. Never happened. You run a draw play, never happened. You run a slip screen, never happened. On that 4th down play, you bring in 3 tight ends. You had Peter Woods, but you didn't go with the jumbo package. They bring 3 tight ends and put them to the strong side of the field, and then you toss it to your slow, hurt running back to the weak side of the field where he's swallowed up by a defensive end. And I go, man, I'm not getting paid $2 million a year, but come on.
Right. I mean, that was a bad play call on 4th down by GR, and I think he would own that as well. And you know what, David? And David, like, at the end of the day, like, the play calling has not been great at any point throughout the course of the season. Like, I feel like Clemson obviously is the benefactor of playing a pretty weak schedule and being significantly more talented than the majority of the teams on their schedule. Like, from a play calling perspective, Clemson doesn't have to do a ton of things that are overly creative to put up points on App State, on NC State, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Cade Klubnik has played great. Garrett Riley has seen massive improvements from year 1 to year 2, and those things can be true. But simultaneously, you do have to take some context into what Clemson has done throughout the course of the season offensively. And with that being said, I am still really confident in Clemson against South Carolina, but I can also acknowledge that this is likely the best defensive unit you're going to see all season Outside of Georgia. Georgia's the best defense. Georgia's probably the best team in the country. My eyes tell me that as well, David. When they're clicking and when Beck is not turning the ball over, that's the best team in the country, and I don't think anybody can beat them. But South Carolina is the second best defense Clemson is going to play throughout the course of the season. But I want to play devil's advocate with all that being said, and I needed to get the prefaces out of the way so the South Carolina fans that watch don't blow me up on Twitter any more than they already have this week. So we've gotten all our formalities out of the way. Guys, you can quit tweeting at me. I don't really care at the end of the day. You can continue to just more free publicity for me. Win-win situation for everybody. Don't really care what the South Carolina fan base has to say. But let's play devil's advocate and let's talk about what happened last week against Missouri. Because I'm a firm believer that this Missouri team is overrated, nowhere near the 23rd best team in the country and not even close. They're playing with an injured quarterback who legitimately is only out there because he has 3 games of college football left and has essentially come out and said as such that he's gritting through a major injury because he's only got a couple of them left and he's not playing in the NFL. Brady Cook's a competitor. 21 for 31 for 237, a touchdown and an interception. That's not exactly something that's not replicable for Cade Klubnik and what he could do in a hypothetical matchup against South Carolina. You look at what Nate Noel did on the ground, 27 carries for 150 yards, 5.6 yards a pop, scored a touchdown. Missouri ran the ball 37 times for 144 yards, which isn't great, but ultimately the offense put up 30 points and did enough to win the game. South Carolina's defense is good, but their secondary is also suspect. And when you get to that second level in the run game against South Carolina, there is some big play potential. The front 7 is super good, and the front 4 is really intimidating, right? And they put up a ton of sack numbers, and they get to the quarterback, and they're disruptive. You can beat South Carolina by running the football right down their throat and running directly at them, because once you get into that second level of the defense in the run game, the tackling starts to fall off. I'm not saying it's not an elite unit, but this is the same team that in a primetime game, their first ranked game in ages, there's more hype, more juice around the program. They gave up 30 at home to Missouri with an injured Brady Cook. Like, I feel like the Clemson fan base is acting like they're rolling the 85 Bears out there. This is a 7-3 football team, okay? This is a 7-3 football team, and the 7 wins are standby because I've got the schedule right here. These are the 7 wins. This is what the Clemson fan base is like clamoring in fear about right now. 4-point win over Old Dominion, Kentucky, Akron, Oklahoma, who is going to finish the season under 500. Texas A&M is a great win. That's a really good football team, and Coach Beamer should be really proud. Signature win of the season and great win. Vanderbilt's a pretty good team. You went on the road and you got an ugly win, and then you beat a Missouri team that's going to end up losing 4 or 5 games at home at the last second by 4 points. This really doesn't have anything to do about Clemson for me. I don't think Clemson is a top 12 team in the country as of right now in this moment. And Clemson probably doesn't deserve to go to the college football playoff because they lost to Louisville. But that's not what this is about. This is about Clemson versus South Carolina. And I think the Clemson fan base is seeing a couple lackluster performances, and sneaking by at the end of these games against Pitt. And for whatever reason, they're not holding South Carolina to that same standard when South Carolina was a 14.5-point favorite at home in a primetime game that had more energy, more buzz, more anything than they've had in their program in a couple years. And they came out flat, and they got punched in the mouth early in that football game, and they won it by 4 by the skin of their teeth late. So for me, this is less about Clemson and their current situation and more just believing that the South Carolina propaganda is only to make those 4 teams that are in the bottom of the top 10 look better and make those teams look like they have better quality wins. That's all the South Carolina propaganda is from the national folks. They're trying to make their league look better in the SEC.
That was one of the epic Faxon Childress rants you'll see from him, but you can catch more of that on his weekly show. Yeah, how about that? This is why we bring him on. Faxon, this was a question that I posed to David after the Pittsburgh win. It's something you brought up in the midst of your rant on South Carolina is about Clemson's deserving of going to the college football playoff. Let's just say that Miami takes care of their business and Cristobal doesn't massively screw it up as he is prone to do. And Clemson doesn't get to Charlotte and they're, let's say, in the Pop-Tarts Bowl at 10-2. How do Clemson fans, in your eyes, how do you judge this season based off of last year? They started 4-4. They finish it out in the Gator Bowl. This team, they sort of reset expectations halfway through the season, fall apart against Louisville, and now it's sort of in a weird space, I feel. Even weirder than last year in a sense, just because that season, we knew it was going to be pretty early on. And looking at this year, Faxon, how do you sort of judge the 2024 Tigers? Let's just remove playoff postseason consideration from it. Let's just say they finished 10-2 and that the ACC championship and college football playoff, it's not happening.
Yeah, I feel like you fell short of the goal. I feel like that's the blunt and the short way to put it. And I think that the staff and the players would echo a similar sentiment. I don't think that a 10-2 season would be a failure. That wouldn't be the term that I would use. A lot of people are going to come out and say that it's a failure and it's unacceptable. I'm not that far off the end of the spectrum as far as pessimisticness and negativity go. I think you have to be realistic, and you also have to acknowledge that the amount of teams that win 10-plus football games in the regular season every year is not a lot. It's 15 or less pretty much every single year. And Clemson is going to continue to be in that 9 to 10-plus win range. Where fans are frustrated is the decline that they've seen from the 7 straight college football playoff appearances, or the 6 straight college football playoff appearances rather, and consistently going to the ACC championship and winning the ACC championship. So you were in that top dog competition every year. I think it would be a little bit frustrating, Grayson, to be honest. But if you want me to take it a step further and be even more honest, Let's call this for what it is. We've spent the last 3 seasons, Clemson fans have, blaming the quarterback. Your quarterback has 26 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, and you still have lost multiple games. Who's the finger to point at now? Because we spent the last 3-4 seasons just blaming the quarterback, whether it was DJ or Cade, neither of which I thought were the fair or the accurate finger to point at the time. And now you can't ask, listen, Cade's had some poor games and he's made some poor decisions. Realistically, you're not going to get better than 26 touchdowns and 4 interceptions through 10 games of quarterback play. You can look throughout the entire course of the country. Cade Klubnik is a top 5 quarterback by every statistic and every metric. So I think that it is a win for Clemson overall that they have found their franchise guy, if you will, in Cade, who is projected to come back next year. And I would expect to lead the ACC favorite Clemson Tigers in 2025. I think it's going to be a good group next year. But this season, you fell short of the expectation. And for the 12-team college football playoff at Clemson, the goal should be to be included in that every single year and to be contending for the ACC every single year.
I'm glad you brought that up about next year. I think this is going to be a good group next year, because you think about, you lose Marcus Tate along the offensive line, that's it. You lose Brenning Stool and Maffa, but we've seen, that they've got tight ends that we don't know about the running backs, but excited about a couple of kids they have coming in. I've seen, 2 of them in person. This is going to be a good skill group next year. You've got Klubnik back, the offensive lineman, Wesco, Moore, Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown's going to be healthy. Troy Salato should be back. That's a bunch of dudes, right? And you're just getting them healthy. Defense, that Peter Woods guy is back. TJ Parker's back. It's going to be a good team. And people say, where is Clemson lacking from those playoff teams? Well, you're right. Consistent depth. Because there was a time a couple of years ago when I remember Xavier Thomas, who now plays for the NFL's Cardinals, was 3rd-string defensive end. Right?
Pretty fun fair.
Yeah, 3rd-string defensive end now is a walk-on by the name of Armin Mason. And that's just a big difference. And then I also will say, and those are issues that need to be addressed in recruiting, and then Dabo's got to go to the portal. We've said that. We know it. There's got to be some depth added across, multiple positions in the portal. But I also feel like coaching has failed this team. I feel like coaching failed this team against Louisville. I feel like coaching failed this team at times against Virginia Tech and at times against Pitt. Does Dabo pull a trigger this offseason and part ways with one or more coaches?
Dang, put me on the spot here.
Not
Dave.
a softball question there, man.
Listen, let's take the stance of objectivity, and let's look at the track record of the last couple of years and what Dabo has elected to do. Okay, last year there were obviously some moves that were made. The year prior, there were moves that were made. If you want to look back in Clemson football's history, not many moves made in the heyday. Not many moves made when you're losing 0 or 1 games in the regular season. Every single year that Clemson has lost multiple games in the regular season over the last 4, there has been some level of coaching change made on the staff. So I think my answer to that would be a tentative yes, David. But obviously, I have no sources, I have no information, and I'm not claiming to. But if you look at the track record and the history of what Dabo Swinney has elected to do when losing multiple games in the regular season, the logic would point you to believe that there could be some changes made. Now, I'm not saying that would be a coordinator. I'm not saying that would even be somebody that's, high up on the fan base's pulse on, the the totem pole necessarily. But if we saw some positional coach changes or maybe even a coordinator change, I don't think that it could be questioned. And I wouldn't be overly surprised because of the track record of the last 3 offseason and the precedent that Coach Sweeney has set. So that is my logic in basing that. And for my answer with that, David, is the last 3 seasons, they've lost multiple games in the regular season. Coach Sweeney has made moves in all 3 of those off seasons on the coaching staff.
Looking at where Clemson opens up in 2025, it's against LSU, a team that's sort of faltered on the expectations that they set for themselves. So it'll be an interesting fork in the road game, sort of like it was against Georgia, where you're playing against a team that the standard's going to be high there as well. And that one game can set you on a path, as we saw. I guess to piggyback off of David's question, Faxon, do you see a potential aggressive shift in the staff coinciding with maybe some moves in the portal where the roster size is going to change? There's going to be some options for Clemson to attack and sort of evaluating where the season's gone, saying, hey, we might have been good enough to make the playoffs. If one game doesn't go all right, it's unfortunate for Clemson to go 7-1 in the ACC. And with the way conferences have expanded, you're out of the playoffs. So the margin of error clearly has shifted for the Tigers, even if they are worthy of being in the conference championship. Do you see any potential moves early out the gate? Let's say Clemson doesn't make the playoffs, and in December, January, there's already a plethora of talent in the portal. Do you see Sweeney maybe pulling the trigger and saying, hey, we got to make some changes here philosophically, or do you see things are probably going to stay pat?
I think things would probably stay pat from that perspective, Grayson, to be honest with you. Listen, I'm not saying that there's going to be moves made. I'm not saying that there's not going to be moves made, but the track record would indicate that a move would come eventually. I don't think it would be as swift as you're referencing. On the portal note, though, this is what I really do want to hammer home because it's something David said earlier. A lot of Clemson fans have complained about the lack of transfer portal usage. It's a fair complaint. It's a fair complaint when assessing Clemson's roster. It's a fair complaint specifically, though, when assessing Clemson's depth. That is the biggest thing that I think you will see change for Clemson football this offseason. I think you are going to see the transfer portal utilized, but I think it is going to be more in a depth supplementary way and a developmental way than maybe some schools are traditionally using the transfer portal. A lot of schools are saying, hey, we lost Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson to the NFL draft, so we got to go get 2 wide receivers to plug in and play as our starting players this year. I don't think that's ever going to be Clemson. I don't think that's Clemson's identity. I don't want that to be Clemson personally. I don't want a constant turnover where your roster is churning and it's the volatility that we're seeing in Tallahassee from 13-0 to 2-10. Nobody wants that, right? You want to have an identity of a program. You want to have the identity that something's being built. But as far as depth goes, I think it's undeniable that Clemson could benefit from utilizing the transfer portal at positions like offensive line, at positions like defensive line, and at positions like linebacker. So I could see Coach Sweeney changing up his methodology with utilizing the transfer portal with the scholarship increase, but I think it's going to be focused on one of 2 things. Number 1, plugging a hole with a 5th-year grad transfer, or number 2, taking a guy with multiple years of eligibility that they could see starting for them one day that they liked out of high school and potentially missed on, bringing them in, and as Sweeney would say, cooking them up in the crock pot. I could see something along those lines happening. I think it's a good way to improve the depth and not having to rely on walk-ons and to have talented scholarship players available off the bench at every position.
I think that's a great way to end this one. This has been great. It's been a great time spent here with Faxon and Grayson. This weekend, of course, Clemson takes on the Citadel. It's special Senior Day, Military Appreciation Day. Stay around for halftime. That's always great. A lot of things going on this week. We're going to have a flyover this weekend. I'm going to go Friday and spend some time with some F-35s, and then I'm going to get a preview of the flyover with some helicopter guys there on Thursday over Death Valley. So some big stuff coming up this week. Faxon, man, we appreciate your time. Appreciate you having Grayson on all the time. Grayson, take us out of here.
Guys, thank you for listening, as always, to the Orange Crush podcast. Before we go, Faxon, any final words? Where can fans find you? Or maybe where can South Carolina fans come scream at you on Twitter?
On a cross.
At Faxon Sports on Twitter, at Faxon Childress on Instagram. You can check out the show at theroarfm.com. And I want to say, before I get out of here, shout out to Sean Poppy and the Lady Tigers. They're playing the Lady Gamecocks tomorrow in Little John Coliseum. That's not likely to be a win for the Lady Tigers, but I'm hoping to see a competitive spirit tomorrow from Poppy's girls, and excited about the trend in women's basketball here at Clemson.
Absolutely. We have that Sean Poppy interview as well as with a litany we've built quite the roster, David, of guests coming to the Orange Crush podcast, and Faxon keeps on building our stock. As David says, buy some stock now. Buy some stock in this podcast as we got Faxon Childress on here. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in. Be sure to thank our sponsors, as you've seen flashed over the banners throughout this episode. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in. If you've stayed the whole way and you haven't subscribed to TigerNet yet, what are you doing? Subscribe. It's easy. It's free. Guys, thank you as always. Thank you so much. Have a great day and take care.